My name is Ilan Valdes. I'm a multidisciplinary artist from Peru. I'm currently working and living in London. My practice has evolved, so it has had different mediums. I started doing photography. I studied audiovisual communication, so I started doing production design. And I was really interested in how changing the different aspects in art direction and production design could alter the way in which we interpreted information. So I started out working with friends, almost like playing, and I would change their outfits and go to different locations. And I would really enjoy seeing how they would change, how their outfits in relation to different locations would alter their identities. And so I would go, we would grab my car and we would like go far away to different places, different locations, and try different things out. And then I would have the final results, and I would select some of them, and it was really interesting how their identities were transformed. So I almost subconsciously or unwillingly, more than subconsciously, started changing the medium from art direction to photography, and art direction became a language for me to explore photography. And I started taking pictures, and then the pictures started becoming their own things, and they became powerful on their own. And as I kept going and doing these projects, I started becoming a photographer without even wanting to, without realizing that it was happening. It was just a natural process of exploring identity, exploring the power of props, the power of mirrors, the power of reflection, and using light as a medium to capture identity. And that was one part of my practice. I've always had more than one aspect of my practice going on, and I'm always exploring different subjects. And so photography was one of the mediums that I used in relation to and with art direction and production design. And then I also painted, and I never stopped painting. And for me, abstract painting was a way of photography as well. For me, every time I painted an abstract, it was me capturing how I felt when I painted it. What was the choice of colors? What were the textures? How were the strokes? What brushes I picked? Everything had its own language, and it expressed something very unique of that specific moment. So photography and painting for me were always two mediums that I worked together, like on hand, like one on hand with the other. And I used to do both, and I used to do photography in daytime, and then at night I would paint. And that wasn't going. And then I went into my master's doing photography, because I did a thesis on identity and on how altering how using analog photography versus digital photography would change the meaning, how using certain color palette would talk about the person, and using those colors rather than these other colors would change how you would read the image. And I would start altering the depth, the speed in which the pictures were taking, the sensitivity of the film, or digitally, like the ISO of the image. And all of those things were changing the way I perceived the person that was being portrayed. And I was really, really interested in that. So I guess that was the window for me to go to study at Camberwell. And when I studied at Camberwell, I had this massive shift in myself, in the way I perceived my practice, because I went from a communicator to an artist. I stopped thinking about me as someone giving out a message, and I started also thinking about the person that was outside receiving that message, and how the message was curated, and how I could narrow it down to the most simple and basic aspect of it, and really focus on the message and what I was trying to say, rather than just in the expression, which for me was very important at the beginning, and then I realized expression is just not as relevant as a message in itself. And it's quite ironic that I'm saying that, because in the end what I did was, I don't even want to think about photography in the way we generally conceive it, and I want to focus in the properties of light and photography as just waves or particles or photons captured, and then that physically has properties, and I want to study that. And that's when I started doing the project Unknown Realities, which are the light sculptures, which were using filters to polarize light and access the molecular stress in almost trapped in plastic, and how that would allow you to see things that we generally cannot access with our naked eyes. And I was really interested in perception as a thing, and what I used to call biased perception, and which is, I don't call it biased perception anymore, because it's almost like a statement. It's like saying we're biased, and of course we are, but it's good if we just call it like perception, because that's what it is. And we can see certain things and we cannot see certain other things, and then we have a way to manipulate that, and I'm interested in that. My background as a person from Peru, specifically from Lima, is, I feel, very much concentrated, summarized, like it's summarized in that picture over there. I think that picture does a really good job of expressing how I feel about how the context influenced me. And that picture is almost like someone that doesn't belong put in a really rough environment and just existing in a really surreal way. And I feel like that's how it affected me. I feel like, unfortunately, I didn't have the opportunity to be myself, express myself, or at least be as free as I would have liked to be. And in a way, I think photography was a way for me to vent and to talk about these things and to express all these things that I had inside that were really affecting me on a lot of levels. And photography for me was a way to delve into these feelings that I did not really understand at the time. I was exploring my own identity. I was using someone else's identity to express my own identity, and it was like a game. We were playing. We were using props to talk about ourselves and collaborating, and all of this happened in a context where models I chose were my friends generally, and my friends and I have this thing in common where I feel like all the people I've photographed in this series have been marginalized in different ways. And it was really important for me to find ways to talk about these things, which is quite ironic because I'm looking at these pictures right now and I feel like some of them are hiding some of them are using reflections to hide themselves, or you get details, or they're like looking away, or they're getting bathed in a river. And it's all about cleansing. It's about hiding. It's about looking back. It's about reflecting. And those are the almost defense mechanisms that I used at the time to address these insecurities and this feeling of not belonging that I was feeling. And yeah, Lima and Peru is still a very conservative country. It's a country that doesn't like last week, or literally last week they released an official document saying that trans people had a mental health disorder, and that's something that obviously is so outdated, and it sometimes feels like the country is going backwards, and trans rights don't exist, gay rights don't exist, there is no representation, and it's really sad for me to feel like in a way I had to leave because I had this feeling that it wasn't my battle. It is my battle, but I just felt powerless and felt like I didn't have a place there to talk about these things and represent these ideas. Whilst here I feel like I can, and hopefully that will generate an impact back in my country where I feel like these ideas need to be heard with urgency. I feel like for the future, I plan to take these ideas of identity and perception even further, and I plan to continue looking at different ways in which light talks about identity and reflects and correlates with identity. I also think that this work, for example, Unknown Realities, talks about using a very common material and looking at it in very different ways. And I'm really interested in reinterpreting things that we take for granted. So I continue to keep doing that, taking it to a bigger level. And I feel like this individual exhibition talks a lot about hope, talks a lot about freedom, but I feel like I also want to continue exploring the darker side that it originally inspired me and that I feel like I left behind in a way. And I feel like I would like to take that back. And I also didn't talk about my self-portraits in a graveyard, which is a process that talks about death. And I even used a dying leaf whose death generates an imprint, and that imprint is death itself, which is a picture of me dead in a graveyard. Well, anyways, so I think for the future, I plan to continue inspiring people, reflecting upon these ideas of identity, about perception, about looking at different ways, and just making the viewer explore and acknowledge different aspects of themselves that they're generally not aware of and that they don't even know that exist.